BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, and on Wednesdays this year, I've been doing a segment about the Long Island serial killer. But just a couple of quick announcements before we begin. The first is that I introduced the show by saying BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia, BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And for those of you who haven't heard the bonus podcast on Instagram, number one, well, I invite you to follow me over there. My name is BlackBoxNed88, and in this episode, if you'd like to get a preview, at the end I'm going to include a segment of the most recent Instagram bonus podcast so you can see what it is like. Mostly talking about music, movies, TV, books, daily life. It started as just my daily journal, then it turned into a weekly journal, but I'm trying to focus them now on a single subject, so that will be at the end of this episode. And the next announcement is that if you are a fan of this program, I invite you to check out the BuyMeACoffee.com page and consider making a contribution to the show. Absolutely anything is welcome. BuyMeACoffee.com, and the link is in the description box, and everything will go to future efforts with the channel, and you will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday here on BBOR. And the last reminder is that this show is available for free downloads at LaunchPad 1 under the same name, Black Box Online Radio. But the easiest way to find it is to go into the description box and look for LaunchPad 1. Lots of things in the description box there. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about my personal theory in the Long Island serial killer mystery. I started responding to the list case back in 2021, and at first I had absolutely no idea what to say because, number one, we don't know when the Long Island serial killer truly started operating. Number two, we don't know when the Long Island serial killer truly ceased to operate. And because this is an unsolved case, we don't know how many perpetrators. We do not know who exactly is involved with these crimes. Is it one person, two people, 5 people are planning these murders? A lot of guesswork is required. And there are very big differences in the way in which the crimes were committed. But to lay out some of the initial groundwork, if you will, to go back through the timeline, the first confirmed victim of the Long Island serial killer was the Fire Island Jane Doe, who was murdered in 1996. They found only her legs at that point, and then later on, after more discoveries were made in the new millennium, they found her skull, and that's why they were able to make the composite sketch of the Fire Island Jane Doe, but she is still unidentified to this day, and obviously she was mutilated. Then the next victim was Peaches Jane Doe, as well as her daughter Baby Doe. That occurred in 1997, and even though these women are unidentified and we don't know who they are, They believe that Peaches Doe and Fire Island Jane Doe were prostitutes or sex workers, something in that profession, and that Baby Doe was simply brought along with her mother. Again, though, all three of those people are unidentified. Then in 2000, the Long Island serial killer murdered Valerie Mack. She was a known prostitute, and she was also mutilated. 2003, the Long Island serial killer murders Jessica Taylor, and not only is she mutilated, but her tattoo is also cut up. And then there's actually a very big gap actually from the murder of Jessica Taylor in 2003 to a possible Long Island serial killer crime, and that is the murder of Cherry's Jane Doe. Both Peaches Doe and Cherry's Jane Doe had a tattoo on their breast of a fruit, peaches and cherries. That's how they get their nicknames. And in one episode, I was even speculating a little bit, saying, is this some type of prostitution ring where someone has required them to get that as a type of branding or marker? I mean, maybe that's possible, but Peaches Jane Doe was identified by her tattoo artist. At the very least, they published Peaches' tattoo in a tattoo magazine in hopes that the artist would recognize it and say, yes, I gave a tattoo to that woman. Somebody in Connecticut did say that he gave a very similar tattoo, if not the same tattoo, to a woman who was present in his tattoo parlor with the woman's aunt and the woman's cousin. So two family members, yet. I mean, the tattoo artist was able to recognize this, yet with all the publicity surrounding it, Peaches Doe is still unidentified. Cherry's Jane Doe is still unidentified. And it's important to note the detail that Cherry's Jane Doe was mutilated, but her body was also put into a suitcase. And I believe that one of the reasons why she is unidentified is because they said that her body most likely washed up on the shore, and there were lots of storms in the area, and that suitcase could have come from any direction because the storm water was pushing debris and objects, including the suitcase, all over the area. So possibly, I mean, there's so many similarities, though, it is quite shocking. Then after these crimes, which I've just described, well, firstly, the crimes that I've just talked about, from 96 to 2003 for sure, are what are known as the Manorville Butcher murders, because that's how the press was reporting about a serial killer, and Valerie Mack was even given the nickname Manorville Jane Doe for a while, until they made some more discoveries, which I'll talk about now. Then the Long Island serial killer murders the Gilgo Four, and, well, last week I did the first episode on the Gilgo Four when I was talking about the murder of Maureen Brainard-Barnes, who was killed in 2007. From this point onward, the Long Island serial killer is not mutilating the victims. They are strangled, and their bodies are discarded. Now, you might hear the famous story about how they are put into burlap sacks or burlap roll. Firstly, almost certainly it is rolled burlap, and what they say in a lot of sources is at least 2 of them were found rolled in burlap, and I believe that this was done to speed up the decomposition. Now, I'll share my theory about that throughout the duration of this episode, but you have someone who has murdered 10 to 16 people over the course of perhaps, 15 years. What could be the theory about how this person is operating? Well, as I said last week, I did an episode on the murder of Maureen Brainard-Barnes, and she was murdered in 2007, but they found her remains and identified her in a much shorter amount of time than, say, somebody such as Valerie Mack, who it took 18 years to identify her. So they could talk to people who knew Maureen Brainard-Barnes, and they could talk to people who would remember specific details. And the thing that stood out to me the most was that she almost never did any type of outcall escorting. Yes, she was an escort. Yes, she advertised on Craigslist, and she frequently would work out of a motel. But this time, she didn't bring the client to the motel. She left the motel and went out to see someone, and like the person who knew her just said that was very, very abnormal for her. So here's the theoretical part. What if somebody is going through escort ads, personals, and because this would even be before advertising on the internet if we're going back to 1996. Yes, the internet existed, but I don't know if this person was finding the Fire Island Jane Doe on the internet. Probably not. I would suspect that he found the Fire Island Jane Doe through a newspaper ad. But somebody is just making a call and coming up with a ridiculous story and even talking in a silly voice, saying something to the effect of, "Yes, hello there, I'd like some company for the evening." And the woman's going to be thinking, what? What's going on? And she's like, "I'm not going to come see you. You have to come to my motel room." "Oh, I'm an old man, and I'm in a wheelchair, and I'm just so lonely. Oh, I even have an oxygen tank. I can barely breathe." And then she thinks, well, oh, this guy's probably harmless. You know what? No, I still can't do it. I'm not doing it. He has to come here. "I'll pay you $1,000 more than your asking price." "Okay, fine. He just keeps telling her whatever she wants to hear because he wants her to come and see him. And it's a totally made up story. And not only that, I would suspect that number one, the killer is talking in a silly voice the way that I just did. It's not even a good impression or a good impersonation, but they're doing it with such confidence, and also they're staying in character the whole time, because that's something about psychopathic serial killers. They are very good at the predatory behavior, and part of that is putting on the facade. I mean, they fool people all day long, and they're almost like natural actors anyway, so he's not going to break character for a second. And with every single victim, he is going to make up some other story. There's going to be something different about every little fake story that he's telling these women to try and come see them. Perhaps he's saying that he's a very wealthy person, that he is unable to get out of bed because of an accident. "Oh, you don't have a car? Well, no, don't call a taxi. I will send my driver to get you." And I think you know where this is going. He's not actually a rich guy. He doesn't actually have a driver. He's talking in a silly voice on the phone. "Yes, I'm an old sick man." And then the Long Island serial killer shows up in his car, and he either meets the escort somewhere, probably meets her at, not exactly at her doorstep from the motel that she was working at, but maybe at the bus stop or the train station, and then drives her to some secluded area, and that's when the woman is murdered. Again, he is luring her to some type of far-out place purely on the suspicion, or on the assumption, rather, on the pretense, rather, that she is going to be earning a large amount of money, and she's going to be with some guy who is going to be mostly harmless, the old sick man, or maybe someone who's been in an accident and is immobile, and they just wove together this absolutely atrocious lie to lure a woman to a vulnerable place to have her murdered. Now, I have to give a shout out to Classic Chevy Cat, who shared two very good observations. The first is relevant to this theory directly when she said that, is it possible that the Long Island serial killer had a garage with a sink in it, and it would have been very easy to set up a kill room in there, or a room to dismember the bodies? I mean, you think like a garage with a sink where the victims could be cut up, and then, I mean, all the blood evidence could be destroyed very easily, and a garage doesn't have to look a certain way and is presentable, and not a lot of people are going to be going there. And even that, I would add in the additional element, a freezer, like a commercial freezer. Now, I don't know 100%, but I have read that they do think that some of the victims were preserved in a freezer for a while, and then their bodies were discarded at different intervals. Maybe it's for a calculating reason, maybe it's for an unknown reason. But definitely doesn't seem to be one of the facts of the case that has been talked about extremely frequently, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, yeah, something like that would happen. Like, this guy drives her to, well, just either his home, and he commits the murder, dismembers the body, and you gotta imagine a garage that has running water, of course, just wiping everything down. You got things like bleach, maybe something like ammonia, but not at the same time, absolutely not. And then it can all just be cleaned up. When I did the episode on the psychological profile about the Long Island serial killer, I shared something from the New York Post when they said that they thought that the Long Island serial killer either had a wife or a long-term girlfriend. It's quite possible. It's quite possible that this is not just the sad, lonely man. This is somebody who's using a wife and a girlfriend as a cover. And somebody wrote into the channel recently saying that, is this just some guy who doesn't want to pay the escorts? Like, he lures them there and they do their business, and then he's just not paying them, so he strangles them. And I mean, I definitely think that's a possibility, but if that's the case, then I don't think it would be the primary objective. And as I said very clearly in my theory, that I thought that the person was making up a story about how he's using the driver facade. Like, he's pretending to be one person on the phone, and then he's pretending to be the driver. In that instance, it wouldn't be necessary. And in all seriousness, the women could be in danger before any type of scenario would kick off, and also she wouldn't have the ability to call or text. Well, text messaging was a little primitive at the time, but she wouldn't have the ability to call or notify anybody where she was. So I think that some steps could happen before that. As I said, that she's driven to a place where she doesn't expect to be in trouble. And for a lot of these crimes, we wouldn't be sure if the victims had any cell phones, 96 and 97, and even the authorities point out that the only person in the Long Island serial killer mystery who was able to make a phone call to 911 was Shannon Gilbert, and that's one reason why they don't believe that she was a victim of the list. But I said that Classic Chevy Cat made another good observation, and that relates to the 2003 murder of Jessica Taylor, and this whole thing about why would somebody lure them to these places? Why is this person committing the murders? Why would he do this? Is it just because he just doesn't want to pay the escorts? No, I think it's because he is dealing with a lot of animosity toward women. And what Classic Chevy Cat said was that Jessica Taylor's tattoo said Remy's Angel, but it was mutilated, it was cut up. However, it was not disguised, and it could have very easily been removed or cut off or cut up in a way in which no one would have been able to recognize it. And what she said was that maybe he thought the word angel was the problem, saying, "You're no angel," again, driven by animosity toward women. But I think that maybe some of you who have listened this far into the episode are probably thinking, well, you gotta do a lot more to have an episode called My Theory and just say that, yeah, he's making up a silly story to invite escorts to a secluded area. How about some other observations? And I'll give them to you. In 2007, something happens that drives the Long Island serial killer to stop mutilating the victims and then strangle them and discard them mostly at Gilgo Beach, hence the name Gilgo Four, Gilgo Beach Killer. And I suspect that there are two possibilities. One of them is that sometime in between the murder of Cherry's Jane Doe and the murder of Maureen Brainard-Barnes, this person was either injured or that he experienced some type of sexual humiliation at the hands of another woman, and that just drove him to commit the crimes in a different way. But I'm really leaning toward that type of injury or just unable to do something in a certain way, because obviously he's still murdering them, But there's a big change in the frequency of the victims. I mean, if my theory has any validity at all, that Cherry's Jane Doe was a genuine victim of the Long Island serial killer. She was murdered in '07, and then Maureen Brainard-Barnes was murdered only a few months later. This is quite different than someone who waited 3 years and 4 years in between the crimes. Jessica Taylor was murdered in 2003. Cherry's Jane Doe wasn't murdered until 2007. What would drive somebody to do this? I really just go back and forth, because I think that suggests there's some type of sexual humiliation going on. Some guy's with an escort and he can't perform, and maybe he was going to murder her anyway, but that just changed his pattern. That just changed his entire thinking. I mean, that seems more like someone who isn't injured, why he chose to stop mutilating. And people bring this up to me in the comment section all the time. They don't agree with either one of those options. They simply say that they think that he got older, he thought it wasn't necessary, and furthermore, the Long Island serial killer hadn't been caught at the time, so he's thinking that maybe it's even a move of overconfidence that he can just leave the victims on Gilgo Beach, and he's not going to get captured. And it's absolutely heinous and disgusting, but the Long Island serial killer has not been captured. So, I think that that is more or less what happened in 2007. As you see, I'm entertaining a single killer theory. I think that the unconfirmed victim, Cherry's Jane Doe, was killed by the Lisk, but there's a very big competing theory out there that the Manorville Butcher, who operated from '96 to 2003, I guess officially, and then the Long Island serial killer who killed the Gilgo Four and the other victims, such as that I haven't talked about here, such as Amber Lynn Costello and Megan Waterman, that those victims are two different serial killers are responsible for the deaths of those victims. First the Manorville Butcher, and then the Long Island serial killer. It's possible. I mean, no matter what, I'll accept the result if the authorities and the FBI and the Suffolk County Police sign off on a solution and they say that, okay, it was this person and this is how he did it. Yeah, I will accept the end result. But as for now, I'm going with one killer. And again, I think that there has been something that happened to him in the year of 2007 that affected his behavior. And as I said, what do you think? Do any of those three possibilities make sense to you? Number one, sexual humiliation, that he was either unable to perform sex or somebody embarrassed him in some way and that drove him to commit the crimes in a different way. Or the second reason was he was injured to some part of his body, maybe something like a leg injury, where he could still strangle the victims, but mutilating the victims and decapitating them was just less practical, and then he decided to discard their bodies. And then the third one is simply he was just older, maybe after the murder of Cherry's Jane Doe. This killer's thinking, oh, that is absolutely too much work. I'm getting old now. It's been more than 10 years since the Fire Island Jane Doe had been murdered, 11 years to be precise. So then he wants to try murdering a victim in a new way. He's going to try and lure Maureen Brainard-Barnes out of the city, the same way that he has done to all of these other women. But this time he's just going to strangle her. Oh, that worked. Alright, now he has this new way of committing crimes, and then he is going to keep doing so. Do any of those three possibilities make sense to you? Please weigh in the comments section down below. And I briefly talked about one possible victim of the Long Island serial killer in this one, and her name is Shannon Gilbert. She is perhaps the most famous person associated with this case, and as you can already tell, I do not believe that Shannon Gilbert was a victim of the Lisk, for the basic reasons that the authorities put forward. The first is that she was found on the south side of the Ocean Parkway in a marsh, and all the other victims were found on the north side going along the, the ocean, for lack of a better term, the water, the Ocean Parkway. And the other reasons is that Shannon Gilbert was able to make a phone call. There are no recorded phone calls from any of the victims that had the ability to call 911. And if I can just be completely frank with you. I think that Shannon Gilbert is someone who had a manic episode, and I don't even know if the threats that she believed on her 911 call are genuine. I mean, genuine. I genuinely believe that she was afraid, but it's almost as if she's afraid of this person and that we have no evidence of. Because Shannon Gilbert went to see a client named Joe Brewer on the night that she went missing. She was driven to his house by her driver, Michael Pack, and her 911 calls have been released. You can hear them on BlackBoxOnlineRadio. And she's saying something that really stood out to me when she says to Joe Brewer to keep the door closed. And Joe Brewer says, "No, I'm going to go upstairs and I want to keep the door open and he can take you out," referring to Michael Pack. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea. And I thought that was so telling because that really showed that she's not afraid of Joe Brewer. If anything, she's afraid of Michael Pack because she believes that her driver, Michael Pack, has partnered with somebody to do some type of physical harm to her. And one detail that we knew about Shannon very early on is that she said, "They are coming after me, they're trying to get me, they're trying to kill me." So, variants of that statement. And people always pointed out she's saying they, meaning more than one person, but it does not appear to be the client. It does not appear to be Joe Brewer. But the biggest reason why I believe that there is no actual person there, that this is all in Shannon's mind, is there's another 911 call where someone says that he sees what he calls the girl and the guy. The guy is driving a dark-colored SUV, maybe a black Suburban, he says, and Michael Pack did indeed have a dark-colored SUV that he used to drive Shannon to Long Island. But that's it. There is obviously Joe Brewer, the client. There is obviously Shannon. Michael Pack is there. And that's it. There are no other people. There doesn't seem to be an ounce of physical evidence. They suggest there that there actually is this person who is waiting outside that is trying to hurt Shannon in some way. Now, some people simply think that this is a bigger operation, it's a criminal operation, that there's some type of thrill kill club going on and Michael Pack was supplying the girls. It's possible. I mean, I don't know what happened. This is an unsolved case. But if I had to make a decision now, I would say that Shannon Gilbert was someone who was dealing with a mental illness. She had bipolar disorder and she self-medicated with things like marijuana and ecstasy as opposed to taking her meds, sometimes even using alcohol. And perhaps she had a manic episode, she ran away, and then on this south side of the parkway that I was talking about, not only is it a marsh, but there is going to be a rather high water level at the time, and it's possible that Shannon drowned. It's also possible that she experienced some other type of internal organ failure. I simply do not think we'll know because Shannon was in the marsh for so long, and I believe the authorities said in the 911 call press conference that the official statement, not based on the Gilbert family's coroner, but the official statement from the medical examiner, is just that there's an undetermined cause of death. So, to recap, I'm going with a single perpetrator who is operating on either starting out with the newspaper ads, personal ads there that look like they are escorts. He's being non-threatening. The woman isn't going to suspect a thing. He's making up these silly stories to try to put the woman at ease to come out and see him. He tells her that he has a driver that will come pick him up. So she's saying, "Oh, I'm going to earn a lot of money. The guy's probably not even going to do anything because he's sick, he's wheelchair bound, or he's bedridden," something like that. And then the person who is posing as the driver is actually the Long Island serial killer. And instead of driving her to this rich, fancy neighborhood with mansions, he is driving her to, well, either his own home or a home that he has access to, and then that's where he is committing the murder, dismembering the bodies, and then something happens in 2007. Maybe it just simply is that he is too old to strangle the victims, or sorry, too old to mutilate the victims anymore, so he resorts to strangling. I misspoke there. But what do you think? And then, do you think that there is one killer or two killers or multiple? Do you believe that Shannon Gilbert was a victim of the Long Island serial killer? Do you believe that Cherry Jane Doe was a victim of the Long Island serial killer? They are both unconfirmed. And please, this is about the truth. This is not about anything associated with me. So if I'm wrong, please lay out all the reasons in my theory that are incorrect. I would love to read your messages, and anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box down below. And there is always BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram. And I said I was going to share with you a segment of the bonus podcast from Instagram. So you can have a listen in just a second. But I should let you know, I'm going to be discussing the book Growing Up, Institutionalized to Globetrotting by Shane Lewis. He was perhaps most famous for being on the show Naked and Afraid, and I started reading his book. And even if you're not familiar with that show or Shane Lewis or his book Growing Up, this is one that deals with a lot of personal experiences. So let me know what you think about this, and you can follow on BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram. Let's have a listen. Being a child of the state, more or less, and there are lots of details about physical abuse and even sexual abuse, and it is shockingly detailed. I mean, the fact that this is his autobiography, and he's just adding in all of these personal details about the abuse that he experienced, I mean, way, way more than you'd think the average person would even want to share or would want to reveal, even just like saying the words out loud. But because he had this very rough life growing up, and he also talked about the reasons why he got into trouble, and more or less, there was a very particular passage in the early part of the book when he said that he never wanted to start trouble. Everyone's always asking, why is he misbehaving? He's like, he never goes out and tries to hurt anyone, or to try and start trouble for anybody else, or to make a problem for somebody else, or to try and attack anybody else. Somebody does it to him first, and then he retaliates. And then he would retaliate in a more dangerous way, and he would get blamed for it. Like somebody would, maybe, you know, in a institutionalized upbringing, he would get even attacked by people, and then he would retaliate more viciously. And I began to think about how that applied to my own life, and I would say the absolute worst experiences that I've ever had were things that I have done. Because, I mean, yeah, okay, people have done some bad things to me, but the worst experiences are the mistakes that I've made. And it was always that. Like, we're talking about, like, the zenith of the wrongdoings in my life. It's just that. Somebody did something to me that I thought was bad, so I retaliated in an even more sinister way, in an even more vicious way, and I created a bigger problem. And of course, some people say two wrongs don't make a right. Some people say fight fire with fire, and you get more fire. Other people say cycle of destructive behaviors. And then there are the other people who are a little bit more pessimistic and just say, that's human nature. Humans are just terrible to each other. I'm at the point right now in life when I don't even know if I can attribute it to any single sentence other than just saying I was wrong for my part of those, you know, like bad experiences. And I think that a lot of that is expressed throughout the book, but it's I could definitely empathize though with the fact of somebody who's just trying to go to class, who is just trying to walk down the hallways of a school or wherever he's at, and someone else gets in his face and they're trying to intimidate him, or they're trying to fight him, or they're just trying to start some type of altercation in an unprovoked way, or that somebody else is the person who's initiating a lot of the aggressive behavior. And a lot of the thought process for me, though, changed when I turned 30. It was actually like, you know, right around the age of 29, 30, thereabouts. And I recognized that a lot of the people who were angry with me in the past and did these provoking things, they had more of a reason than I thought. I mean, yeah, absolutely wrong. I mean, there are very healthy ways to solve problems. but I could comprehend more about how my behavior was bothering other people, and I'm about a third of the way through the book. And right now I'm only at his teen years. As I said, he starts out growing up through the reform school, and then he actually goes to high school in still somewhat of an institutionalized way, dealing with schools for delinquent children. But he turns out he's really good at basketball, and he actually gets scouted by some universities until they find out which which school that he actually came from. I guess it must have been some type of like either intramural or some type of basketball event where they didn't know what school he was from. But like there were scouts that were interested in him, and then they found out that he was from one of these institutionalized schools, and then they thought we want nothing to do with him. But he still has this dream of playing basketball in college, and he just wants to pursue that. But there's another point in the book that I thought I could really empathize with, and that was when he talked about how he doesn't get the basketball scholarship. So what he ends up doing after high school is he's trying to get into a local college, and he ends up working at McDonald's. And he loses his job for something that I think a lot of us can also relate to, that he checked the schedule on Friday because the schedules are posted on Friday, but then somebody crossed off someone's name, and then they wrote in his name, Shane Lewis, to work on over the weekend. But he didn't think he had to show up until Monday. So he comes in on Monday for the shift, and they said, hey, we changed the schedule. You were supposed to work on the weekend. And then he's like, oh, well, I didn't know. I checked Friday, and no one told me anything like that. They said, doesn't matter. You missed a day of work without calling in. You're fired. And he didn't do anything immediately. This is the thing I think we truly understand. He didn't do anything immediately. It wasn't until he had an altercation at his next job that he unleashed his frustration about it. And that one was something about how he had parked in the same parking space for a year, and then one day he got a ticket, and they said, yeah, you weren't supposed to be parking there. And then he just unloaded on the boss and told him all the reasons why this is a bad idea. And he trashed the break room in the company's I guess headquarters, you would call it. And then he was fired from that one as well. That one I think we can also understand. But what I didn't get was, looking back as someone who was in my early 30s now to some guy who was probably 19 or 20 years old, I was like, there's so many ways that he could have come out on top in that one, where, it was probably a dumb rule that they allowed him to park in a parking space for a year, but then all of a sudden one day, no, you can't do it anymore. Horribly inconsistent. And I thought it was going to be all about how he learned to stand up for himself, and he learned to express, his side of the story. Like the thing at McDonald's, that is just absolutely lousy, but we've all dealt that. I mean, I've been in a position where I wasn't able to check the schedule, and then they did call me though, and they say, hey, why aren't you at work? I was like, oh, I didn't know. Hey, that's your responsibility. But there really isn't a perfect system about this stuff. And I thought that it was going to be all about this type of, okay, well, now he's learned not to put up with bullshit rules. But much like growing up, think about all those things he said. Somebody did something to him, so he retaliated in an even more destructive way. Like, they decided to either change the rule or enforce a rule that was never normally enforced. All of a sudden, you get a parking ticket because you parked in the same spot you've been parking in for a year. So what does he do? He trashes the break room. And it's the same behavior. And this really goes to show you that we don't always alter our personalities with time, or just because somebody grows up, their personalities can often stay the same. And I really think that there is very little change in personality after the age of 4. Nothing to do with childhood. After the age of 4, you can mostly tell what kind of person someone is going to grow up to be. But that's just me. It's not like I'm a professional or anything. And that more or less is where I am in the book, about just someone who wants acceptance, I suppose. And that is also what I think about when I look back on my own life. So many times, the reason why I was feeling bad was I didn't have the approval of people that I wanted. And it's not just approval from anyone. Yeah, of course, lots of people approved of what I was doing and this and that. Yeah, I didn't care about any of that. It's the people that I wanted. And I think that that's a hard concept for other people to grasp, because there's some discussion in here in the book that I didn't comprehend too well emotionally. I can comprehend the words, but he's talking to someone as a teenager who is doing their PhD thesis, and they asked him if he would read the outline of the thesis, of the dissertation, rather, and he gives some comments and feedback, makes some insightful statements, and he said that it was just so, it was such a joy to find out that someone appreciated him and cared about him and respected what he was thinking. That's the stuff that I find difficult to comprehend, because when I look back on life, yeah, there were a lot of people that tried to play that role for me, but I was just so disinterested in them because, much as Shane Lewis has said in the book, I mean, I felt that they were being overly aggressive about it, so that I would respond in a way that was not showing appreciation of it, and that just leads to a whole bunch of problems. But as far as personality changing, though, I think that a lot of us are not gonna change too much in terms of our attitude or our emotions. Like, we're gonna experience very similar emotional sequences, but also that maybe we have a higher sense of right and wrong, morality and ethics, and even the people who still do bad things, they try and to show some regard for the rules, and if they don't, well, they end up in prison. But there definitely seems to be a bigger comprehension in terms of consequences of our actions. But anyway, as I said, I'm only 1/3 of the way through the book. It's called Growing Up Institutionalized to Globetrotting by Shane Lewis. And as I said, if you're someone who has had like bad experiences dealing with abuse, I don't think that you would like it, because it is so vividly and very precisely detailed in those parts. But other than that, I mean, it's really is a powerful autobiography. And that's just my 2 cents for the Weekly Journal. Everybody stay safe, fairness, and empathy.